Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. I have Eugene Bingham. I know, he's so famous. He actually sat down with me to record this session, so fantastic to have you here, mate. How you doing?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's
Such
fantastic.
an honour.
Yeah, well, I was lucky to be on your show, and you've been on mine, and
Yeah.
we just really connected. So I wanted to get you back on because you've just written an article which was very, I thought was an important one to discuss, and it was about the tragic death of an ultra runner last year or this year in the Tarawera Ultramarathon. And while we don't want to go, too deep into the specifics of that particular case, or, we'd like to know what you know about it, but
Sure.
wanted to have a discussion around the dangers of extreme sport or ultra marathon running and some of the things we just need to be aware of. So, obviously Eugene and I, neither of us are doctors or, any of this should be construed as medical advice, but just as a, have to
Yeah,
get that out there. But
absolutely.
as runners and people who have experienced quite a lot in the running scene, and I've certainly, experienced enough drama that it is something that we need to talk about. So Eugene, tell us a little bit about what happened and, whatever you're happy to share and what you
Sure.
wrote about in your article, which we'll link to in the show notes, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. Yeah, I was a competitor in the Tarawera 100-mile race in February, which, as you said, when you said last year, it does feel like last year, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Gosh,
it
it feels
does.
like 5 years ago. But yeah, it was
It's
in
COVID.
February 2020, all those years ago. And in that race there was about 260 of us lined up, and in that race was a runner, an older, he was 52, so from Japan, a very experienced runner, had run Tarawera previously, had run lots of other milers and ultra races, and unfortunately, about a kilometre or so from the finish, he collapsed, and about 34 hours into the race. And although people rushed to help him, and he was taken to Rotorua Hospital and eventually to Auckland City Hospital, he died. And I remember the afternoon we heard about it. Tarawera put it up on its Facebook page to let us all know that one of our fellow runners had died. And I stopped. It was a shock.
Yeah.
We do this thing because we love it and because we get enjoyment from it. And here was someone who'd pay the ultimate price.
Yep.
So I wear a couple of hats, and one of them is as a journalist, and so but really, what first kicked in was I really wanted to know what had happened.
Yeah.
I really wanted to know what had happened. I've had health issues myself. I've had a few scares and so on, had a few wobbles in races, and I thought, just from my own point of view, I was really curious to find out. But I also thought it was important to find out for other runners. Was there
absolutely
a lesson for others? And so I started to see if I could find out. COVID got in the way a little bit and distracted me, but eventually I did manage to track down what happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what was the result of the findings in this particular case? I mean, I want to discuss a few, and
Sure.
I think in this case it was a couple of things, wasn't it? But it's without picking, and we're certainly not picking on anybody or any race or anything, or saying this is bad or anything. But what was it that you discovered in that sort of research?
Sure. So initially, I remember the talk was that he might have had a stroke, or there might have been some sort of underlying condition.
Yeah.
But I got hold of his death certificate, and it shows that he had multi-organ failure and acute respiratory distress syndrome, which are both conditions that they can be in multiple causes of those sorts of things. But the one that jumped out to me was rhabdo. Are you going to make me say that the proper name for it, Lisa?
Rhabdomyolysis.
Thank you.
I'm an expert in rhabdo.
So that was the third one on the list, and that was the one that really jumped out to me.
Yeah.
Months earlier, I'd spoken to Dr. Marty Hoffman, who's at University of California, Davis in the States, and he's a sort of recognized around the world. Basically, if there's a paper about medicine involving ultra running, you'll
Mhm.
find Marty Hoffman's name on it.
Wow.
You know,
Cool.
he knows his stuff. So I'd rung him months ago at the suggestion of a friend, Dr. John Anate. And I had a good chat to him, and he sort of ran through the list of, you know, what we could be looking at here. But he was really, you know, it was a stab in the dark at that point. But he told me then that you know, that there had been no deaths from rhabdo, known deaths from
Oh,
rhabdo
no,
from
and
ultra
yes.
runners.
Yeah.
Yep, and no known deaths from ultra runners of EAH, exercise-induced hyponatremia. So,
Yeah.
so we were kind of a bit like, oh, what could it be? What could it be? Yeah. So when rhabdo appeared on the death certificate, I rang him back and said, actually I emailed him and said, hey, this is what it says. And he was very surprised because he keeps track of deaths of ultra runners around the world, and as he said, there hadn't been one recorded before. It doesn't mean there hasn't been one, of course.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But it's just no one. Yeah, no one causes.
And I think a lot of these things, you know, will have contributing factors.
Mm-hmm.
And it you know, completely unrelated, but you know, going through the journey with my dad recently, it was at the end, he had multiple organ failure. He had sepsis, however, and before that he had an abdominal aneurysm. So it shows you a question like, what did he actually die of?
Yes.
Multiple organ failure, probably, you know, or the organ sepsis, chicken or egg scenario. So these things, one leads, you know, an acute respiratory syndrome, and they all lead on from one to the other when the body starts to shut down, basically.
It's a cascade, isn't it?
It's a cascade. It's a very good way of putting it. So, so rhabdo, and while there is perhaps no documented case of a death from rhabdomyolysis, I don't know if there, you know, I know in my life I've had rhabdo. I can't even remember the number of times I've had rhabdo.
Yeah.
And I took away kidney damage from it. And you know, the last few years I've been trying to unravel that damage and undo that damage, and I'm getting there slowly. So it is it's quite a common thing. So even we don't know whether in this case that was the actual final, you know, what actually did it. It certainly would have been a major contributing factor.
Yeah. Well,
so what is rhabdo? I suppose you better explain what that is, eh?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, from your experience, you'll know better than me, but I spoke to Dr. Hoffman and to Dr. Tom Reynolds, who's the race doctor one of the race doctors for Tarawera. And they explained it as the muscle starting to break down and the myoglobin from the muscle being released into the bloodstream. And then it basically just starts clogging up your kidneys and just causing real damage in your kidneys. The problem with it is the symptoms for it sort of sound like a lot of other things, and also can just sound like what you might expect running an ultramarathon.
Yeah, the pain of an
muscles. Yeah, tenderness of muscles, a bit of confusion, and so on. And then even some of the blood tests that you can do to pick it up. So they look for CK. You are much more proficient in the medical world than me, but the thing that they test for. There was an experiment at Western States a number of years ago where they tested bloods of people at Western States, and they tested something like 160 runners. All of them had elevated CK levels.
Yeah.
So in part, it's just a function of ultra running. Your muscles are going to break down to some extent. So that makes it very, very tricky to find out, to discover it. And Dr. Hoffman said sometimes the first sign the first sign that you get that someone's got rhabdo is they have a seizure. So it can be a tricky condition to pick up. It's really, it's hard, isn't it? It's really hard.
It is hard, but you know, like when you are going for, you know, and some of these races are 24, 36, 50 something hours, and you're going to have some breakdown of muscle, and you are. I mean, keeping an eye on the color of your urine, or if you are not producing,
that's the important one. Yes,
it is probably the easiest thing to think about, because like you say, the nausea and headaches and, you know, confusion and fatigue are all very general parts of ultra running anyway. So keeping an eye on that, like getting a pouch of fluid, what I would find is that in the lower abdomen, and I don't know if whether this is an actual medical symptom or not, but in the lower abdomen, I'd developed this pot gut when I was running. And it, it wasn't fat, obviously. Within a couple of hours, it was fluid, and would usually coincide with my kidneys then not producing, or producing very little output. So I think that might be a sign that something's going on there. And rhabdo, like we're talking ultra marathons, but I have seen a case of rhabdo in a half marathon in summer. You know? Yeah. Wow. So a mild case, but enough to be, taken to hospital. So it's not even just people doing the extreme stuff.
Yeah.
But it is and you have to ask yourself, how much damage are we doing every time we do? And I often get asked, why are you not running anymore? Why are you not doing ultras anymore? And apart from life's gotten a bit crazy in my end.
Yes. Sure.
And I have not got the time to be doing ultras. I want longevity. And while I love ultras and I love the culture and I love what I got to do, and I'm certainly not I train lots of ultra runners. For myself, don't want to put myself at that risk anymore now that I'm north of 50, and I want longevity, and therefore my health comes before my sporting ambitions now. It didn't when I was younger, but now unfortunately, one of the side effects of studying medical stuff for the last 5 years is that I'm now a little bit more cautious.
Yeah.
Because, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
What you don't know, you just go and do, and you don't actually know the implications. And sometimes you don't actually know the implications until, down the track, like years down the track.
Yep, sure. Yeah.
So I think, that's where I'm sitting at the moment as far as the sort of the dangers and the risks. I mean, how did you feel as a runner who, you were in the same race, doing the same distance? You're a little bit north of 25 now. Were you concerned?
So I'm 47.
Yep. Yeah, you're 47?
Yep, 47, yeah.
And did this make you stop and think about, do I want to keep doing this stuff? How do I feel about it?
Yeah, it sure does. It certainly makes your family think of that, doesn't it? Yeah. I think it reinforces that you need to have really good self-management. You need to be well prepared. I spoke when I spoke to Dr. Reynolds, and I said to him, we had this big conversation about all the, the cola-colored urine and all that sort of stuff, those signs of rhabdo and all the different other conditions that can come about, EAH and so on. And I said to him, boy, listening to all of that, do you recommend people run ultramarathons? And he said, look, at 3:00 when the medical tent is full and I've got my hands full, I look around and I go, what the hell are you doing this for? Yeah. But he says, but it's a small proportion that get badly affected. And, as long as you manage your risks and you're aware of it, he said one of the things that he's really concerned about is people jumping up in distance too quickly.
Yes, me too.
Or they're a runner suddenly, wow, I'm going to run 100 miler, because it has become, I think it's
the new marathon.
I told him I spend more time trying to talk people out of doing milers than I do of trying to talk them into doing milers. I'm not going to talk anyone into doing a miler. It's a very personal choice. I spend a lot of time talking people out of it, mates and so on, going, I don't know if that's a good idea, mate.
Me too.
Yeah. And that sounds bad. I'm doing a trail running podcast.
I know, and I'm a bloody ultra running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just think people need to be really conscious of the risks, and they need to be prepared to put the time in. And that's one of the things that you've identified.
Yep.
You've got to prepare your body, and you've got to know your body. I mean, I've been running my whole life, and I didn't take the decision to enter the miler lightly. Certainly wouldn't now, knowing what I do know now.
Yeah.
And when I say no, I mean, I'd always heard of rhabdo. I'd heard of, EAH. I'd heard of, dehydration, all this sort of things. And you sort of think about it, you're sort of like, yeah,
Yeah.
But having lined up at the start line with someone who didn't make it home, that really reinforces that these are real risks, and you have to be prepared for them. You have to be ready for them. So I'm not going to stop ultra running, I don't think, but I'm certainly going to be a hell of a lot more careful and listen to my body.
Exactly.
Sometimes you can get that. I find one side of ultra running that I struggle with a little bit is the whole kind of like, you're not going to quit unless the ambulance takes you off the course kind of thing.
Yep.
I don't like that.
No,
I really don't like that.
I totally agree.
I agree. I love the whole mental toughness thing out of it. Don't get me wrong. That's one of the things that I enjoy about it. But you have to listen to your body.
Yep.
You have to listen to your body. I've pulled out of a 100K race where I could have pushed on.
Yep.
Looking back, it's like, I could have pushed on. At what cost?
Yeah. Yep.
It just wasn't worth it. Could I push through and be out there for another hours and hours and hours and hours, putting myself at risk? Yeah, sure, I could have, but what was the risk? What could have happened, and what do I get out of it? Instead, I actually came away from that race having learned a hell of a lot of lessons.
Yeah,
and they prepared me for the miler, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful attitude and a very wise mind, because like some of the things that I did in my younger years, or even, I'm talking 40s, were stupid. There is no other word for it. And especially in the 30s, my 30s, I thought I was bulletproof and I could push, and I had that mentality, you're going to have to drag me away, kicking and screaming. And I have seen lots of others, and I have nearly pushed my body on a number of occasions to the point of death. And I've been very, very lucky not to have died. I've had tetany seizures, which is where your potassium level and your electrolytes are so out of whack that the whole body cramps, and so you end up having a heart attack. I was luckily at the point that I had it. I was in Alaska, and I'd been for 6 weeks out in Yukon with poor nutrition and so on, and pushing the body every day. I'd just come off a mountain when this tetany seizure hit. Luckily, I was 2 minutes from a hospital, and they saved my life.
Wow.
But that would have been deadly very quickly. I've seen, I've experienced extreme levels of dehydration in the Libyan desert, where we only had like 1.5 to 2 liters of water a day, in 40 plus temperatures, and gone to the point where I no longer was in control of my body and my, not only just hallucinations but the central sort of nervous system starting to shut down, massive kidney damage, and taking nearly 2 years to recover from that. I've had food poisoning while running across Niger, and again, bleeding at both ends, pushing it to the absolute limit. I did pull out of that race at 64 hours after 222 Ks, but that was way too late. I've gotten away by the skin of my teeth, not to mention going through war zones or military barred areas, or being in really dangerous, situations. And, that's another whole podcast in itself. But, it wasn't worth it. I look back now, I think, I was just so afraid of failure. I was so afraid of not achieving that which I'd set out to do, that, and I have to think about it now and go, I wasn't in, people who are in war scenarios or some survival situation where you have to freaking go to the limit to survive. But I wasn't in there. This is a Libyan desert ended up like that, but you know what I mean?
Had some adventures.
Oh yeah, some stupid shit. It really was. But at what cost? Now I've had a lot of health issues in the last 5 or 6 years. And a lot of that comes from, I haven't been able to have children, and so on and so forth. And these are contributing factors. Sure. I don't know if it's the only reason for certain things, but now as a coach and as a older, wiser woman, I don't want to see people pushing their bodies to that point where they're actually close to dying or causing major damage to their body. It really is not worth it.
No, there's pushing the limits, isn't there? And mentally, I think there's a lot to be said for having a goal that's going to stretch you when you're going to go for it. But the key is to be prepared, isn't it? To actually to have done the training, to have prepared your body, to have test, so that when your body's screaming at you, it's saying, okay, you know what, to pull the pin, or to stop and rest or whatever. I think there was some good. Tom Reynolds has some 5 tips, I think, which are really good.
Yeah, let's hear them.
To prepare yourself for an ultra, especially ultras, but even marathons. I suppose these are helpful. Absolutely. Number 1 on his list, and I think he would make this number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is don't take drugs like ibuprofen and Voltaren and those sorts of things. Do not take them. Yeah, super important. His second one is drink to thirst. You can have problem. You can run into problems if you have too much liquid.
Yep, which we'll talk about in a sec.
Yep, be prepared for the conditions. Have a plan for a range of conditions. So make sure you've got thermals. Make sure you've got jackets and so on, and layers that you can take on and take off. Especially if you're going to some of these remote areas that we go to as ultra runners. Number 4, the race doesn't end at the finish. Pack warm clothes. Get some food ready that you can eat, some liquids. And another thing that he pointed out to me is actually some of the most dangerous times is after that finish, when people get to the finish line and drive home and they're tired.
Oh, it's so true.
You can crash easy. You fall asleep and crash. Yep. And number 5 is look out for each other. And I think that's so important. Sometimes there's a bit of competition, isn't there? But number 1, you've got to look out for each other. Yep. You are comrades in this together, and you've got to have each other's backs. And those little relationships that you build up with someone you've never met before. I still remember having a good chat to a farmer from Geraldine. I spent a lot of hours with him at Tarawera. Haven't spoken to him since. Never met him before in my life, but there we were together, best mates on the trail. Awesome. You keep an eye out for each other. You're looking out for each other. You make sure they've got their bottles filled at the aid station. You make sure that they're not, getting confused or anything like that. Just looking out for each other is so important, isn't it?
Oh, those were
the 5 tips that he
Thanks, Dr. Reynolds.
I thought they're pretty good tips.
They are very good tips, and a couple that I wanted to pick out, like the training, In my early days as a coach, I remember taking an athlete who went from half marathon to running the Big Red Run, 250 Ks inside a month. Now that I look back at that was stupid. Yeah. He came over to do 100K, to be fair, and he was doing so well. He decided to carry on and to do the whole thing, and it was an incredible achievement.
Oh yeah, yeah.
However, broke him a bit. Like, it never was quite the same afterwards, and he wasn't ready. Yeah. He wasn't, like, his body wasn't ready. So when you prepare your body, when you're training and you're doing these long runs and you're doing back-to-back running and you're doing strength training, you're doing mobility work, all these things are preparing the muscles so that they don't break down so quickly, and they don't you don't end up with rhabdo. And another big piece of the puzzle is the experience side of things. Because then you can actually start to feel when your body, so doing a check-in. As a runner, I used to do like little check-ins every half hour or an hour. I'd go, right, I'm doing a control like a pilot would before he flies the airplane. How is everything? How am I feeling? Have I drunk in the last 10 minutes? Have I eaten anything? When was the last time I weighed? When was the last time? Just doing a mental checklist as often as you can. Now, one of the hard things with ultras, though, is that you start to lose your brain function. So all the blood flow is going away from your executive function up here, and you become like a bit of a moron. You're like,
absolutely. Trying to do maths, impossible.
I remember doing a 24-hour race, the one up at the Millennium Stadium, and there was some guys there testing us, so just for a laugh. doing noughts and crosses as we went around the track, and our brain function as the day and night wore on, just we weren't even able to add up 1 + 1 anymore, like we're just completely like you just got no blood and the brain's not functioning. So what that does mean is that your ability to make good decisions is also impaired. I remember saying to one of my friends who was a paramedic, and she was with me in Death Valley, and the second time I did Death Valley, and she said, I said to her, you are responsible for my house, because I was lucky I had a crew in that situation. If you pull me out, you pull me out. I know that you won't pull me prematurely because you know what it's taken me to get here. But my life is in your hands in the respect that I respect you. I respect your knowledge as a paramedic. If you tell me it's over, it's over. And she will be able to make that decision, because I knew from my personality and from what it had cost me to get there, I wasn't going to be pulling out anytime soon. So sometimes if you can have, in the case where you have a crew, have somebody say, this is now getting dangerous. And it's a fine line. Like I pulled my husband out of a race once, Northburn, a race that I co-founded a few years ago down in South Island. And he was doing the 100K, and he actually rang me on the cell phone at 70 Ks. We had a massive storm up in the mountains. It was wild. It was his first 100K. He was in the mountains. He was scared shitless. He was hypothermic. And I was like, oh my God, darling, just come home, So that was, and he could have pushed on. Like, and mentally that cost him a lot, because he pulled out, and he didn't push over that hump. So there's this fine line between, softness
but he lived to tell the story.
Exactly. And he's done it since, we've done 100K.
Does it matter,
No.
We love those stories. I love reading your books. I love reading the adventures that you've been through. But by gosh, when you think about the risks, as you say,
and the cost,
man, and that's a common story. It's not, you're not alone in that. That's the sport we're in. And people push themselves. It's ridiculous when you think of it. But it's a tough one, and I think that's a really good idea, having someone who's got your back. Someone who you can trust. Like you say, they're not going to pull you out,
just because
you stub your toe. Oh gosh,
you vomited on the course
or
something.
Exactly. Who hasn't? But you can trust them to that when you've gone to over that red line, bang. Come on, mate, you're out. And I was lucky at Tarawera. I had a really good mate who paced me. I went through some hallucinations, nothing major. But it was, I had my mate there, and he was looking out for me. In fact, he laughed at me. And I was
What did you see in your hallucinations?
Oh, I had two. So we were running around. I don't know how familiar you are with the course. We were coming around the back of Blue Lake, up towards the Blue Lake aid station. So about 120K in. And it was just before sunrise. So, you get that funny light.
Yes.
It's still dark, but the light is changing. And I swore, coming up to the aid station, I saw a robot sitting off to the side of the trail. And in my fuddled brain mind, I justified it as, it must be like it must be scanning us, telling the aid station that we're coming. And so I saw it, and I said to my mate, Gene, that's that little robot there. That's pretty cool. And he's like, the what? The robot there. And he's like, there's nothing there. And I think it was a tree or something. I don't know what it was. But it's funny how I justified it to myself. So I thought it was fine. And then after the light changed, I got a couple of situations where I don't know if you call this hallucination or is vision going, but the ground was just like liquid glass.
Wow.
I was like, I'd lost
That's cool.
Yeah, I was like, oh, should I put my foot down or not? And Gene was sort of going, what are you doing? Come on. It was like, what's going on with the trail?
What's happening to the ground?
It's
turning into glass.
Wow. So that was, but people have some great hallucinations, don't they? But the point of that was, I had my mate there with me. It was never unsafe. and I'm grateful for that. So I think that's a really good tip, Lisa.
I think hooking up, or if you're in a race where you don't have crew, which most of them are, that you do hook up with somebody. If you can try and not too many people, because then your pacing will be all out. But if you can just hook up with one person, or maybe two at the max. I remember running the Gobi Desert and the Sahara with Sam Gash, who was in the Desert Runners movie together, and there's this great footage, and Desert Runners is playing at the moment on TVNZ if anyone wants to check it out. It's a cool movie. And we're running along holding each other's hands, bawling our eyes out, but we got each other through both of those massive days, both in the Sahara and in the Gobi. And we ran together in India as well, but with crews in that case. But that comradeship that we had there was just gold, and it just helped when you were scared shitless, you had someone there, and we did get lost, and we did fall to pieces, and we did have all sorts of dramas, and we kept each other going through all those hard times. And I think that's one of the beautiful memories for me that I take away from that. And there were other people that I've done, the things with, the depth of connection that you have with a human being when you've gone through something like that is just next level. And that's one of the beautiful things, because we're talking about all the negatives here, but it is just, she's a very amazing woman, that one, she's done incredible things. And
it is incredible, isn't it? Those connections you make, the friendships you forge, even if you don't see each other again, but you've got that bond that's forever. Those moments that you shared when you're vulnerable,
when you're up shit creek, and literally,
I
mean, there have been guys, who didn't even speak the same language, or a woman I remember running in the Sahara at one point with I was crying, she was crying, she was from South America somewhere, didn't speak a word of English, or another French guy who picked me up in Jordan when I was running across there, and I'd passed out, and he came along, picked me up, got me into the next checkpoint, and another French guy in Niger. It's just like wow, the stuff that you help each other through is gold. But deaths do happen, like they do. We had one in the Gobi Desert. We had a young man, Nicholas Cruz, who was only like 30 or 31, I think, and he was first time doing it, and he wasn't trained enough, I don't think. And I think he'd underestimated the thing, and he unfortunately paid the ultimate price. And then you've got also the dangers. I mean, you got cases like with Turia Pit, and the forest fires in Australia. There are things that can go wrong, even in these organisers race. Falls where you've hit your head and concussions, and So just because you're in an organised event, do not think that there isn't an element of danger, or that you're going to have to be self-reliant. You cannot. And in some of these countries, it's beyond the abilities of the organisers actually to cover every base.
Absolutely. Well, even in races in New Zealand, we go to some remote places in races, don't we? It's difficult to get. You're not just going to be able to ring up 111 and get an ambulance there.
Nope.
It's not like that. I've been in a race, 100K race, where because there'd been lots of runners going through this, it was a narrow bit of the trail. And it was dry. It was a really dry year, and runners had been going, over this bit of land. And basically, as the day wore on, it sort of started to break down a little bit. And I was just the unlucky one, stepped on the trail, and it went, and I slid down this bank, and I went down, thinking, when's this going to stop? And luckily, I came to a stop on a tree, not badly, and then basically had to scramble my way back up. Now, I was fine, but those sorts of things can happen if I stumbled in a wrong way as I came off the trail, hit my head, whatever, so you are, I mean, it's not, we don't want to run in a cotton wool suits, do we? But
no, we don't want to go
and
through
we're putting
life
ourselves
like
out there, but you do need to be conscious.
Be conscious of it, I think.
And even when you're training too, when you are going out in remote areas, just be make sure you tell someone where you're going, preferably run with some other mates. maybe think about taking a locator beacon with you if you're going somewhere really remote.
Absolutely.
Have a phone with you. Do those sorts of things. Take those precautions. Just be a bit careful. We yes, we want to push ourselves. Yes, we want to be out there. Yes, we want to find new limits, but we also want to get back home.
Yeah, we want to come home to our families and not die on the way.
Yeah.
If we can, and you can, I mean, people can take that to the level that they want to go to, but just don't want people going and thinking that everything's safe because it's an organized event or because hundreds of other people have done it. Means absolutely nothing.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, how many thousands of people have climbed Mount Everest, but it's still a freaking dangerous thing to do.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean it's safe. Just because lots of people have done it. I mean, I think like if we just went through a bit of a list now of some of the things that you like from a medical perspective that you should go and do some research on and find out about. One of them, so we've talked about rhabdomyolysis. Dehydration is the opposite. Dehydration is what we think about more, and that's certainly something that can lead to troubles. Then you've got hyponatremia or EAH. So hyponatremia, let's just talk about that one briefly because that's a biggie. Hyponatremia is a low sodium level in the body. I've had it. Lots of people get this, and it's again a hard one to diagnose because it has very similar to the opposite problem, which is dehydration. So hyponatremia, you've actually got too much water on board. One of the signs of this, I remember doing, was 100K, one of those Oxfam ones. And because we'd been walking for so long, there was a walking, running situation in a team. I got really bad hyponatremia in that one. I was drinking a lot. I wasn't having my electrolytes right. And my hands were like elephant hands.
Wow.
So that's an indication that there's something going on. So look for signs like that. Look for swelling, edema. And that could,
nausea, lightheadedness, those sorts of things as well. Which again,
coordination, coordination going haywire. And the problem with hyponatremia is you don't want to just be thinking it's dehydration and then drinking more. So it's a low sodium. So your potassium and your sodium have an antagonistic relationship in your body, and you have for every 3 bits of sodium that gets pushed out of the cells, 2 bits of potassium come into the cells, and it acts like a pump, and it's actually what helps your muscles contract. So if you get that sodium, potassium, and your other electrolytes out of whack, there's a whole lot of things that can happen. Hyponatremia being one of them, and another one being a tetany seizure, which is what I mentioned, the one I had in Alaska.
Yeah. So what's that? That's.
So this is where, in my case, it was the potassium that was really, really low in the body at 1.4. Like that's deadly low, and I'd had in the couple of weeks building up to this actual seizure, my hands were doing this and I was cramping all the time. And that was if you ever start doing that, like this weird thing where your hands are starting to spasm.
So like dinosaur hands almost.
Yeah, so your fingers, for those listening can't see me doing my funny thing here. It's the muscles contracting in your fingers and pulling in. So I remember, swimming at some point just in the lead up to this where this was happening to me. And I was like, what the hell's that? And then it would go off again. But that was a sign that I didn't have enough potassium, as I found out later. So then I had a couple of weeks later this tetany seizure, and it started with the whole body, just like every muscle in the body cramping all at the same time. The most painful thing you can ever like really bad pain, including your face muscles, including your heart, which is the problem. And the pain was horrific. I thought I was dying. I was. Luckily, I'd just come off a mountain. I was taking shelter in a public library because it was pouring with rain and freezing cold. And this happened in the library, and there was a paramedic in the library who just happened to be fixing a light bulb. and he saw me go down. He
That's one of life's
immediately,
light bulb moments.
yeah, that was very lucky. He put a gel straight into my mouth. He just happened to have a gel on him. And that gave a little bit of glucose and stuff and managed to release the seizure for a couple of minutes before it happened again. But by then he got me into the ambulance and around to the hospital pretty quick, smart, and they were able to save me. But that could have been deadly.
Wow.
That could have been a massive heart attack, and on the way out. I've seen that also happen we were in the outback of Australia with a friend, Chris Ord, and he had a tetany seizure at at kilometre 90, and we'd been running in 40 odd degrees heat, and he'd been taking electrolyte tablets. So electrolyte tablets are absolutely crucial. You've got to have them. But the ones he was taking didn't have potassium. They had everything else in them, but the ratios weren't right.
Right. Yeah.
And he ended up, we had to, again, incredible pain, the whole body seizing, racing him into the hospital at Alice Springs. What I did do, and what you can do in a case like that, is I gave him like 3 cans of Red Bull. Not advertising for Red Bull at all, because generally that's a shit thing to be drinking. In this case, with what it's got in it and the sugars and stuff, that helped. Yeah. So but that's just a potassium sodium balance thing.
That's the thing, isn't it? We're messing with our chemistry. We're messing with the body's chemistry. I don't know what it was, but I had one race where I just finished, and as soon as I finished, I just started shaking. Shaking. I couldn't stop for hours, and it wasn't cold. I wasn't cold.
I know what that is. Yeah.
What is it? Because
I don't know the name of it, but I've had that many times. And it's basically where you've just got nothing left in the body. Yeah. No
somebody
glycogen.
Somebody said to me glycogen. Yeah, just the glycogen's
you just got
gone.
nothing. You've got nothing to heat, because like we're heating ourselves all the time with our glycogen supplies and our glucose that's running around in our body. And you were just on absolute zero, basically. So if we're taking your blood sugars, I bet you would have been really, really low. Right. And so like in Death, I'm telling all my bloody stories, but
no, it's right.
I remember in Death Valley, we had like 55 degrees during the day. I'd had heat stroke and had all that. And then at nighttime, it was 40 degrees and I got the shivers. I was doing that. I was like this and it was 40 degrees. And I was like, really, what the hell's going on? It's 40 degrees. It was a lot cooler than it had been, but I just had nothing left in the tank. And therefore I was shaking. And that can be a real danger when you're, say, in the Himalayas, which you've also done. And that's where you just cannot warm up and you can't keep your heat going. And then you can run into other problems where you just start, your blood sugars just keep dropping, and you can end up going into a coma just because your blood sugars is too low, and you got hypothermia.
And that's the other problem that happens, and I've had this a couple of times after ultras, is I just have zero appetite. I just can't face the thought of food. You've got to get something into you. You've got to start replenishing your body. You've got to look at soups or something to get some nutrition back into you, don't you? Because like you say, it can be dangerous.
And that's a recovery too. Like if you can get something in, it will help you recover a heck of a lot faster. Even just generally fully training runs, if you can get something in within an hour. But usually within an hour, you just do not feel. You just feel like vomiting if you eat too much. So you just have to take a little nibble. And something that you're really usually it's savory, salty things that you will have a taste for. So soupy things or something like that. Just try and get something in. My gosh, there's a lot to be worried about, isn't there?
And that's the thing. Look, these are all things that you need to be conscious of, but you manage your risks, don't you? You can manage them. And one of the other things that Dr. Reynolds said, and I think is pertinent too, though, just while we're dwelling on the bad things, is that these risks are exponential. So he says, don't think that you run 100k. Oh yeah, well then 160k is that's only another 60k. It's not. It's an exponential increase, and an exponential increase in those risks as well. So be conscious of those things as well.
So watch when you're jumping up in distances, and also don't fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I did it once, therefore it's a piece of cake. I can do it,
Yeah.
every race. I've run into this where I've, I came off the back of a Himalayan one. I'd just done 222 Ks. I thought it was the bee's knees.
Yeah.
And then I went and did it just a couple of weeks later and I hadn't recovered properly. A 50K in Australia.
Yeah.
And the wheels freaking came off at 25K. And I was I had to be rescued by some beer drinking Aussies in the middle of the bush. That was a come down, I'll tell you, like ego suddenly deflated.
But absolutely, Lisa. And that's, I learned that lesson even just with the marathon.
Don't say just.
Don't say just, but just with the marathon, I ran my first marathon when I was 21 and I trained for it. And so I found it actually quite easy. I don't mean that I wasn't fast, but I got to the end of it. I kept waiting for the wall. The wall never came. I got to the end of it. I thought, so I made the mistake. I was thinking, marathons are easy.
It's a piece
of cake.
Lined
up for the next one. Took it cruisy. Hardly did any training. It kicked my butt so bad. And it was just the marathon telling me, sunshine, respect the distance. Respect the distance. You cannot run something like this without respecting it. And it was a good lesson. It was a good lesson. I learnt my lesson. Boy, it hurt, but I learnt my lesson.
And by that token, respect any distance. People often say to me, I'm just doing half marathons, or I'm just doing marathons, and because I've done lots of ultra marathons, they think, that would be nothing for you, and I'm like, hell no. Every distance is to respect, because it's all a pacing thing for starters. 100 meters is a long way when you're going at Usain Bolt speed, and 5K is really fast when you're going at your maximum, and a 10K is an eternity. So it's all relative to pace for starters. And the second thing is, never think because you did it once, next time it's going to be sweet. And Eugene's just given us an absolute good example of that. And it is. It's like take every race as if this is a big deal, and you have to prepare your body for it. And don't, another mistake I made, this was awesome. Another embarrassing thing. So, done 25 years of stupid stuff. And then when my mum got sick, I didn't train, obviously, properly for 10 months. And then I ran across the North Island raising money for a charity. A friend had died, Samuel Gibson, a wonderful man who we lost. And I was so moved, I decided I'm going to run anyway. And I had not been training for 10 months because I've been looking after my mum. And I sort of thought, I'll be sweet. I've done this backwards and upside down. I can do this. Oh my God, my ass got handed to me. And I got through it, but hell, it was hell. It was not funny. So prepare. And even though you've done it 100 times, doesn't mean you still got it.
No, that's right. And
I certainly don't got it now.
and that point you made earlier about recovery too. I did a 100K race, and then had this plan to recover. Take weeks off. Got peer pressure. Yep. Mates were doing a 50K. Come on. No, I don't want to. Peer pressure. Okay, I went and lined up, did this 50K race. Oh boy, and it just set me backwards. It set me back so far.
Yep. Mentally too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So we've really got to, respect things.
We've got to respect things. We've got to not expect that our body's got it just because we've done it once before. We've got to be aware of things like rhabdomyolysis, heat stroke, hyponatremia, altitude. If you're doing altitude, that's a podcast in itself. Be aware of burnout, hypothermia, dehydration. All of these things are things that can and do happen. Tetany seizures, electrolyte imbalances, getting lost, going through dangerous places, breaking ankles and all that sort of thing. It's all part. It is can happen. So be aware of that. And we're not saying don't go out and have adventures, because that'd be really hypocritical. But prepare for those adventures. Get proper training. Get proper coaching. Know what you're in for.
It's like driving a car. One of the most dangerous things we do. But we make sure we wear our seatbelts, we make sure our cars have got a warrant of fitness and they're serviced and everything, we make sure there's air in the tires, we make sure there's fuel in the tank, and our bodies have got to be like that as well, don't they?
Exactly.
Now, driving is so dangerous. You know, so many people a year die on our roads.
Yeah,
but
more than ultras.
So we don't not drive. We just make sure that when we drive, we're prepared, and our car is prepared. Well, that's the same with running. You know, there are risks, not as much as driving, but there are risks. But we just make sure we've got the air in the tires, that we've got the fuel in the tank, that we're serviced and ready to go when we line up for races.
Brilliant. Eugene, you've been fantastic today. I know you've got another thing to get to. So I want to thank you for writing that article. I want to thank you for your honesty and openness about this, because it's really important that we do talk about it in our running community, and just share the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think it's important. And, you know, keep up the great work. Of course, people should go and listen to Dirt Church Radio. It's a fantastic podcast.
Well, we have great guests. That's why, Lisa.
Oh, it was an honour to be on your show, mate. And I love talking to you, and I love what you do. So thanks very much, mate, for being on the show today.
Anytime. Thanks, Lisa.